So a few weeks ago, I hit you guys with the rap mixing vocal chain video, and it got a lot of views. A lot of people were liking it, sending me their love and feedback, and obviously wanting to see more. And as I mentioned in that video, no two vocal chains are the same. It's always going to change and be different depending on what you are mixing. Well, I showed you how to do it in the context of a normal straight up rap song, but some people might be wondering, how would you do it on a melodic rap song? Well, what's a melodic rap song? One that involves singing and melody. And right away, your head probably goes to auto-tune. You're 100% right. So in today's video, we're going to talk all about a melodic rap vocal chain that I've created here, how I went about putting each plugin in step by step, what I'm thinking about or being mindful of as I put this together, and ultimately how to achieve a really dope, forward-sounding melodic rap vocal. Are you ready? Let's go. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is your boy 5-Piece producer and engineer extraordinaire. Thank you for checking out today's video, and I'm super excited to break down this melodic rap vocal chain for you. It's worth noting from the beginning of this video that you should not be mirroring exactly what I'm doing step by step. Instead, I really want you to pay close attention and figure out why I'm doing what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and just my frame of mind as I work through this process. You may find that when you're doing this on your own, you may not need as many plugins. I have quite a bit in this session. You may only need a few. You may end up needing more. It's really going to depend. And like I said in my previous video, no two vocal chains are the same. It's always going to differ depending on the source material. Now, with that in mind, let's jump onto Pro Tools and start talking about this vocal chain and specifically talk about what I've done step by step to get started. All right? So before I do anything, how about I just play a quick little blurb of this track? You might recognize it from some of my other videos, but let's just play a little moment of this so you have an idea of what we are dealing with. All right, here we go.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. Problem is I don't care, what's mine is yours, I share it all. And I can't call it, but ain't stopping till I got it all.
All right, cool. Pretty straight up. You can tell it's a simple track. It's one vocal track. We don't have a whole lot of layers or any of that stuff. And that's important to keep in mind, right? There's less things competing for attention in this mix. So depending on your track, you may have just one vocal like I do. You may have a stack of 5, 10, who knows, right? And each of those situations is going to require something a little bit different because now there's things fighting for attention, right? Now that being said, let's talk about the first plugin that I have in this chain. So the first plugin I have in my chain is a gate plugin, and it's specifically the C1 gate. I love this plugin. It's very easy to use. It's straight up, just simple, and does the job effectively. And what I'm using it for is I'm using it as a way to continue being lazy when I'm mixing. And what I mean by that is I don't always want to have to go in and edit things, crop things out, reducing silence or removing silence, for example. You know, gaps in the performance. As you can see here, I have a few gaps where, you know, there's no vocal happening, right? And, you know, I could obviously go in and delete them and crop them and all that, but that's a lot of work. I have to fade, I have to do all this stuff. So what I'm ultimately doing is I'm using the gate to automatically do that for me. And what happens is any vocal that doesn't pass this level, which is essentially these moments of silence, maybe there's some headphone bleed or whatever, or some rustling in the background, but when there's no actual vocal performance, those parts are ultimately getting muted and reduced, and that's allowing just the actual vocal to come through when it needs to come through, and when there's nothing that, you know, should be audible, it gets reduced. And again, this just helps get rid of background noise and gaps of silence, and more than anything, just helps me reduce the amount of time I need to spend editing. If you want to watch a cool video that's more detailed about vocal gates and how to use them in your setup, I'll leave a link up above, but definitely check that out if you want some more information on how to use a vocal gate and why you should use it in the first place. Now, the second plugin I have in the chain is none other than a vocal tuning plugin. Obviously, we're doing this very early in the chain, and we're doing it to pitch the vocal, maybe add some of that robotic auto-tune kind of effect, and just get that correct pitch in the track, because nothing sounds worse than a super out-of-tune vocal. Now, again, I'm using the king of all vocal tuning plugins in my opinion, which is Auto-Tune. I'm specifically using Auto-Tune Artist. I know there's going to be somebody that asks me, why aren't you using Auto-Tune Pro or a different version? Auto-Tune Artist is the version that I like to use, and it's also because I have Melodyne, and Melodyne I essentially use as a graph editor where I want to go in and be more manual with my editing and getting things to the exact pitch that I want, whereas Auto-Tune is sort of like this blanket thing that adds the effect, the character that I want, obviously by dialing in certain settings and just keeping the general vocal where it needs to be. So obviously we're putting this vocal tuning plugin very early on in the chain after the gate. The gate is getting rid of the silences and the, maybe some of the breaths and the little stuff in between. And then this pitch plugin, this vocal tuning plugin, I should say, is keeping us in key, making sure that nothing sounds awkward or weird. And if it does, of course, we could go in with another editor such as Melodyne, but in this case, we're having just the Auto-Tune Artist as the second plugin in the chain. Now, the third plugin in the chain is a De-esser plugin. In this case, it's the FabFilter Pro DS. I'm using this to catch the S's on my vocal. These things pop up occasionally, and I really encourage that you put the de-esser wherever the issue becomes apparent. In this case, I felt like my S's were already problematic from the beginning, so I put the de-esser in right away to catch those S's, reduce them before I do additional processing like compression and EQ and saturation and these things, which may actually enhance the S's, right? So I'm trying to catch the S's now while they're a problem so that they're not as much of a problem during these later processes. And what might even happen, and I'm pretty sure it does, is I bring another de-esser in later to continue to massage it, right? And I'm sure you might be wondering the settings here. The threshold is completely dependent on the track, but we're reducing the S's on the vocal by about 3. What might be a cool idea is to just play some of this right now, and we can actually take a look at the de-esser and see with this meter here how much is getting reduced or when it's getting reduced, paying attention to the specific phrase that I'm saying in the track while it's happening.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
A lot of T's, a lot of S's. What to say, right? You can see how that's getting grabbed, you know what I mean? These different words, they could become very problematic, and we want to address them early in this particular case. You don't always have to put a de-esser on at the beginning, but if your vocals are already pretty sibilant and harsh, it's a good idea to throw this de-esser on early in the chain. Before I continue with this vocal chain, I wanted to say, if you could please smash that like button if you're getting value so far, if you like what you're seeing, or if you're even learning something new, it would mean so much to me. It helps my channel get discovered by more people like yourself, and helps me make more content specifically to help you. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and hit the bell as well so you can get notified every time I drop a new video. I usually drop something on Thursdays, always focused on helping you sound better and helping you make more money with your music. All right, but let's get back to this vocal chain and talk about the next plugin. So the fourth plugin I'm using in this chain is a compressor plugin, and it's specifically Plugin Alliance's Alicia Impressor. I like the Impressor. It's very transparent. It can do some really cool things. I've actually really gotten hip to this plugin and the other Alicia offerings through Plugin Alliance, and I really like them all. If you haven't used them before, definitely check it out. Now, what I'm doing with this plugin is I'm very gently compressing everything, okay? And you're gonna see throughout this chain that I'm doing a lot of serial compression. If you don't know what serial compression is, I'm gonna leave a link up above that'll break it down and show you how to do it in the context of your own mix. But right now, this is the first compressor out of several that's gonna be on this chain. And what it's doing is it has a very slow attack, a pretty quick release, a roughly 2-to-1 ratio, and I'm gonna play and you're gonna see that I'm losing upwards of 3 dB based on how I have this set. And I'm adding back about 3 dB. So whatever I'm losing, I'm adding back. It's making the vocal more consistent, more upfront and in your face, and, overall just doing what I want it to do, gelling everything together, taming those harsh peaks, those loud peaks, bringing up the quiet stuff, and just, again, getting a more glued kind of sound together, right? What might make sense is if I actually bypass everything on my chain, including the compressor, and I'll just put it in, and now we could see the difference that it's making. And again, pay attention to this meter. This is showing you the gain reduction, how much volume is being lost, every time this compressor is in. We should see it lighting up to about 3, like I said. Check this out.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
All right, so just a little bit more consistent, a little bit more flush. That's all we really needed to do. We don't need to do anything crazy. Again, we're going to set this up in different ways depending on the vocal, but I'm deciding to set it up very gently, very transparently, getting a little bit of gain reduction, upwards of 3 dB, adding it back, and again, we're going to do some more processing to just continue to make this flush and louder. Now, the next plugin in the chain is a multiband compressor plugin, specifically the FabFilter Pro MB. I love this plugin. I think it's very versatile. And similar to how you may have seen me using it in other videos, I'm essentially using it to reduce particular problematic areas. In this case, we're looking at about 411 hertz and below, so the low end, a lot of the muddy area. Getting rid of that to add a little bit more clarity to the vocal, since this particular frequency range can become very overwhelming, especially after compression. I find when you compress stuff, it kind of makes this area poke out a little bit more, and that leads to more muddiness and congestion, and not really what you want in a mix. We want to get a lot of clarity out of a vocal, and taming this particular area is important to achieving that. The other area I'm obviously focusing on here is between 5,500 and 14,000 hertz. This is probably sibilance, okay? Like there's a little bit of sibilance happening here, and I am taming it previously with this Pro DS, but I want to continue just, squashing this area, making sure it doesn't poke out and become too problematic, right? So maybe what I'll do is I'll play this and I'll bypass each individual band and put them in, all right? So let's start with the low band first.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
And if you want to specifically hear what frequencies we're affecting, I could solo the high band and the vocal itself. So you can tell it's a lot of that S action. Here's the lower one. Right, a lot of that low end. You want to be careful though. You don't want to get rid of too much of this because that is where the warmth and the presence of a vocal is, but you definitely want to tame it a little bit so it doesn't become too much of a problem when you're mixing. The next plugin that I have in the chain is another compressor. And again, I'm really focusing on using some serial compression here, breaking down the compression over multiple steps, and you're going to see that overall we're doing things very gently. Now in this case, I'm using a Waves CLA2A. Believe it or not, this is one of my favorite LA2A plugins. Yes, I've used the Universal Audio and some of these other emulations, but something about this one that I really like, you just got to make sure you turn the analog button off, and from there you should be pretty all right. But when I play this, if we watch this meter, you're going to see that I'm losing about 1 dB of gain reduction. So I'm getting 1 dB of gain reduction happening, 1 dB loss of volume, right? And I'm adding it back with some key gain. I'm sure I might even be adding a little bit more gain with this. You're going to see this plugin does add a lot of magic and sparkle. So let's bypass it and put it in.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
So you could tell we're obviously adding quite a bit of volume, making it back through this plugin, and I'm just getting a little bit more presence. I'm not losing a crazy amount of volume. We're not totally squashing and killing things. We're just getting a little bit more reduction on the loud parts, the peaks, increasing the overall level of the track, increasing the level of the quiet parts that don't get compressed at all, and overall just adding to a more flush and forward sound. It actually is making probably one of the bigger differences on this track compared to the other plugins. Now after the compressor, I'm using a channel strip plugin. I'm specifically using the preamp, EQ, filters, and compressor section on this channel strip. I'm using the Lindell 80 series from Plugin Alliance. It's a Neve emulation, and I like to use this plugin for a number of reasons. The first one is I like to use the preamp to add a little bit of volume and saturation. So even if I were to take out the EQ and take out the compressor and we were just listen to the preamp and how it's affecting things, I'm basically driving this up 1.5 dB roughly, and obviously adding that volume, but it's also sort of imparting some harmonics. You can obviously do a lot of cool stuff with this plugin and with the saturation that it can impart by using the preamp section. So anyways, let me play this without it and with it, and let's just see how it's sort of coloring the sound. And this is just the preamp. We've taken the EQ and the compressor out.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
So we're just adding some volume, maybe adding a little bit of color, nothing too crazy, all right? Now I'm using a filter here as well, and I'm specifically filtering 70 hertz and below, so I'm getting rid of the, sub low end on the vocal. And then I'm also getting rid of about 18 kilohertz and above, so the very, very high end, right? So I'm trying to prevent this from being too brittle and stuff. And you're gonna see that I'm adding some higher end stuff as well to make up for this cut that I'm ultimately adding here, right? I'm gonna play this real quick. You'll see it's not a huge difference, but it's just sculpting, tightening things a little bit. Here we go. Without it and then with it.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people
even though I'm cutting this stuff, it's ultimately making it sound a little bit more high-end, right? It's just, again, sculpting things, pushing things in a certain direction, and it makes it sound more high-end as a result. Now, on the EQ side of things, there's really 3 bands that we're manipulating, and the first and probably most important is the high-end. I'm adding almost 5 dB close to that cutoff point, in this case to 16 kilohertz, and this is a shelf, so it's boosting everything above this point. And I love this particular EQ because I find this exact model, this Neve emulation, it sounds like glass. It can really add a lot of shine and presence to a vocal without that nasty harshness or digital sound that you get from certain other EQs. That's why I rely on this particular plugin a lot. Now, aside from adding this top end stuff, I am adding about 1.6 dB to about 3200 hertz. So 3200 is roughly the vocal presence. This is where the vocal really lives, and also where the intelligibility of a vocal lives. So I'm adding a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, 1.5 dB roughly, to this particular range, helping it cut more. And then on the lower side of things, I'm actually getting rid of 110 hertz by about 1.14 dB. So I'm doing a slight cut, getting rid of that low end again, that mud that we don't really need, and ultimately just cleaning it up so that we get a more high-end vocal sound once again. So let me get rid of the EQ and let me put it in and take a listen and see what's happening. So without it and then with it.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
Pretty significant difference, as you could tell. A lot more high end, a lot more presence, and a lot less muddiness right from that low end presence that we were having before we put the EQ in. Now, the final part of this channel strip that we're really using is the compressor section. I don't always use this, but I did decide to use it today. We have 100% dry wet mix, so we're getting 100% of the compressed volume. There's no parallel kind of thing happening here. And I do have the side chain set to 400 hertz. So the low end is not going to trigger this compression. We're really compressing 400 hertz and above. Hopefully that makes sense. Threshold is obviously dependent on the track. We can watch this meter here when I play it, and we could see that we're losing probably between 1 to 3 dB somehow. That's usually my sweet spot between that range. I got a 2-to-1 ratio. So 2 dB comes in, 1 dB comes out, cutting the volume roughly in half for anything that passes the threshold. And I am adding about 2 dB of makeup gain. So even though we're losing a certain amount of volume, it's going to be added back through this makeup gain. And my recovery time is, medium quick, 400, okay? So let me play it without and with, and I will mention that I do have the Nouveau style on. I know that's a specific sound that you get out of this compressor. Everything else is off. I'm not nuking it. I don't have a fast attack. We have a pretty quick recovery, like I said, but the attack is still intended to be slower or medium. I'm not too sure exactly how it's set on a default level. But let me get rid of this, and we'll just put it in and pay attention, see if you can hear the difference. And if you look at this meter again, you'll see the gain reduction taking place.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
Now, I particularly find that this thing is really dealing with the sibilance. Like if you notice where it's really grabbing and reducing, right, where you saw it going up to this 2 or 3 kind of reduction area, 9 times out of 10 it was around a sibilant part. Obviously it's catching these things that are jutting out, and it probably comes out a lot because of this EQ that we're adding here, this high end that we're adding. It's enhancing those more problematic spots, as well as, you know, the nice stuff that we like to hear, the pleasant stuff. But at the end of the day, we're using this compressor to catch that loud sibilant stuff that we just added, reduce it a little bit, keep it in line, not allow it to be too overwhelming, and obviously smooth everything else over. And aside from that, we're not using this plugin for anything else. The volume on the output is 0. We're not using the gate at all, and everything is sounding pretty tight. So we could talk about the next plugin in the chain. Now, the next plugin in the chain is another de-esser. So like I said, every time that an S or the specific sibilance in the track becomes a problem, we're going to go in with a de-esser, and we're going to, you know, clamp down on that stuff, reduce it so it's not so problematic. Now, unlike my first de-esser that I used, this first de-esser on the left side here is from 7K to 17.25K. So it's a very kind of specific but broad enough, but a still more specific range. If you look at the second one, you're going to see that it's a much more broad range. It's 4K to 17K. So obviously on my first one, I'm really catching the high-end harmonic stuff that's problematic. And then on the second one, I have a bit of a wider net, so to speak, to capture these S's and reduce them. And I know you might be thinking, well, didn't you just do that with the previous step with the compressor? Yes. But ultimately what's going to happen next is I'm going to add some more saturation and other things that will potentially cause those S's to become even more problematic. So I'm almost pre-treating them in a way, right? And the range on this is set to 150, so it's going to be a very, very small reduction. Any S's that become too problematic and come up, it's only going to come down by 1.5 dB. With my first de-esser, just as a point of comparison again, that was set to a 3 dB range. So that was actually double the amount of reduction. So on the first de-esser, an S breaks through the threshold, it gets turned down by 3. On this one, it breaks through the threshold, it gets turned down by 1.5. So it's going to be louder than the initial de-esser that we set. But again, it's a wider net. It'll probably be a little bit more sensitive because of that. So I don't want to be reducing things too drastically as a result. All right. So let's check this out real quick with and without it.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
And if you want to just hear what's being lost, a lot of T's, a lot of S's, right? Which is exactly what I would expect. But again, using another de-esser closer to the end of the chain to just continue to make sure that the S's are smooth, they're not too problematic, before we do some final sweetening, so to speak, with saturation and other steps. So I kind of gave it away on that last point, but the second last plugin in this chain is a saturation plugin. I'm specifically using the Plugin Alliance Brainworks Black Box. I love this plugin. I've actually shot a few other videos about how to saturate your vocals using this plugin and other plugins. If you want to watch that, I'll leave a link up above for you to check out. And all I'm doing here is I'm adding quite a bit of saturation, 70% saturation. I'm adding a little bit of the pentode, 55%, a little bit of the triode, 56%. Looks like a small number. And when you do this, I find that this adds a lot of volume in general, so you have to back off on the output, and I've done that. Typically, the output is set right in the middle to 50%. I've backed this off to about 38. And as you can see here, I'm not using the full mix, so I'm not just fully making this a wet sound. This is a little bit more wet than dry, but not too much. It's 56% wet, so we're getting a 56% affected signal. But what this is ultimately doing is it's creating additional higher harmonic content, which allows the sound that you're applying this to, in this case the vocal, it allows it to cut more. And I like that. It just allows it to just jump out and become more forward in the mix. And we usually like that. It usually makes things sound more pleasant as a result, but you don't want to overdo it. Otherwise, you end up with like 808s and Heartbreak Kanye West or early Travis, super distorted sound. Might be cool if that's what you're going for, but if you want it to be subtle and you just want your vocal to cut, you have to obviously not go too crazy with it. That being said, let's see what this sounds like with and without the plugins.
I don't know what to say, just pass pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
Significantly louder, significantly warmer, way better presence. Overall, it's doing exactly what I want it to do. And I definitely encourage that if you haven't been using saturation on anything in general, whether it's vocals or something else, start to play with it and see what you can get out of it. Now, the final plugin in this chain is sort of a tough one to really classify, but I'm basically using a dynamic suppressor plugin. In this case, I'm using Soothe 2. Now, Soothe 2 is something that I haven't talked a lot about. I've mentioned it in a few videos, and I've been meaning to do a video on it. But I like to use this plugin to, again, handle some harshness, especially stuff that comes up as a result of using the saturation and maybe certain EQ moves and whatnot. And I like to use it because it's very transparent, whereas a de-esser or a dynamic multiband compressor, they're very specific. They grab the whole band and they reduce it, or you have to be very, very fine-tuned and grab specific pockets and do all this work. This plugin is almost like an automatic mixing plugin. It can listen to your sound, it can figure out which bands or frequencies are just too much, too problematic, and reduce them for you automatically based on how you've set them up. So I'm using this at the end of my chain to, again, just catch certain harshness and other problematic frequency pockets that are coming up as a result of all the processing I used before to, again, just smooth it out or soothe it, as the title might suggest. Now, what I think it might be cool is if I show you what I'm actually losing. So if I solo this and press Delta, we're going to actually see visually what's being reduced frequency-wise, and we're going to hear it, and I'll maybe play it before and after so you can hear.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side.
Kind of sounds like artifacty almost, right? Like you're getting like this like weird digital technical kind of sound, right? And I'm really not reducing things by that much. My mix is only 29%, so I'm losing at most 3 dB of volume. You can see the 3 dB here. Nothing's really even going that far, you know. I'm emphasizing this particular band at 6.6K, so just pushing that up so it reduces it even more, because this is where that sibilance and other harshness is really living. But overall, I'm not trying to overdo this, because this plugin, if you overdo it, you can really start to hear it. It's going to sound like that digital sound that I just showed you, and it's not going to be good. So let's see what it sounds like before and after, and I'll keep the vocal soloed at first so we can really tell here, but without the soothe and then with it.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind.
It's hard to really describe what this thing is doing, but it's just definitely making things sound smoother to me. And I know it's a very, finicky plugin. Some people don't like it for that reason. I like it a lot, but I definitely don't put it on everything. I use it in certain situations. And if you don't have access to a plugin like that, it may make sense to maybe use a multiband compressor or a dynamic EQ or a de-esser, something, again, to just grab some of these harsher pockets or things that are coming up too much as a result of the saturation. So let's talk about the final verdict here, and maybe I should just play this whole track without everything, okay? Except for the auto-tune. I'm going to leave the auto-tune on because that's sort of an important thing for this track. Without the auto-tune, it loses almost everything. But just take a listen to how different the vocal sounds, how much quieter it is, how much less present it is without these plugins, and then what happens when I put the plugins in, how much it just comes forward and jumps out at you and sounds like, a final track in a way.
I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. Problem is I don't care, what's mine is yours, I share it all. And I can't call it, but ain't stopping till I got it all. I don't know what to say, just pass the J up on the left side. These days these people talk, they quick to tell you what's on their mind. Problem is I don't care, what's mine is yours, I share it all. And I can't call it, but ain't stopping till I got it all.
Pretty significant difference. I don't think anybody needs anything for that. And hopefully YouTube's volume normalization didn't totally kill this, but you should be able to hear the difference in the presence, the tonality, the texture, everything about it just comes way, way up. and you see how I've broken a lot of things down. Sure, I have a lot of plugins on here. Again, you might have less or more. It really depends, but I'm maximizing my vocal chain here. I'm using every single plugin, but a lot of it, as you could probably tell, is small little movements that I've distributed across multiple steps. Rather than having one plugin slam something, I have multiple plugins just massaging it a little bit until we get to the point where I know it's working beautifully. So I hope you got value out of this video. If you did, please smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you're new here, and hit the bell as well so you can get notified every time I drop a new video. I drop something new every single week, always focused on helping you sound better and helping you make more money with your music. And if there's anything that you want to specifically see in a future video, leave it in the comments below, and I'd love to shoot something specifically to help you. All right? I'll catch you guys soon. Y'all take care. Peace.
5,